My name is NT, aka Oprah. Thanks for thanks for coming. We're going to have a great time talking about fitness, sales, AI, and all the rest of that. A few rules before I introduce myself and introduce my esteemed guest, good friend, and great mentor, actually. Some rules of engagement. First, feel free to go to the comments section over on the right and just say who you are, which organization you represent, where you're calling in from, so the folks can see that. We encourage lively debate. If you guys want to go back and forth after you made some amazing point, on the comments, then we'd love to see that as well. Any questions that you have, please put them in there. And at the very end, we'll save a time period for some Q&A and some back and forth with us. And then finally, if you feel like we made a particularly interesting or amazing point, feel free to put hoorah, in there, because we enjoy that too. We just like to know that we're not just talking to ourselves, that we haven't otherwise put you to sleep. So those are rules of engagement. Very excited to have everyone here. So let me introduce myself very briefly, and then I will introduce Scott, because I know there are a bunch of people out there who I know and then a bunch of folks who I don't. My name is Etuk. Actually, the full name is Ntiedo, but that gets mangled too much, so just call me NT. I am the founder and CEO of FitGrid. I started an educational video game company called Ntiedo back in the day, and co-founder of Boutique Fitness Solutions, which is in the fitness space as well. And I've long been a tech nerd. In fact, I grew up in Nigeria. I taught myself 6 programming languages at the age of 11. I was building video games, bad video games with video games. And I came to America, studied computer engineering at Cornell, and have been a tech geek, ever since. Always wanted to start the next Apple. Still want to start the next Apple. I'm working on it. But have been big in the tech ecosystem for a long time, just understanding all the things in and out that have happened in technology. And I've also been very interested in health and fitness. His mom's a doctor, and I just like working out. So there you go. Along the way, so right now in the fitness space, there are a couple of businesses that I'm involved in, but FitGrid is the one that is the tech fitness space and the one that's really getting involved in AI. And we are a community engagement platform for that space. So we believe that fitness is all about the people. And so you're more likely to go back to classes the more connected you are to the other folks in class, or the instructors, or the front desk person. We see a huge opportunity to engage that entire community, activate them to increase retention, increase referrals, and all the rest of that. So we come at this from a very unique perspective. And then outside of that, I just love talking. So that's the reason why I'm here today. Let me introduce you to a good friend, a good mentor, someone who's been an advisor to FitGrid along the way. First, I'm going to make him blush, although he has so much hair, you can't actually see him blush. This is actually the neatest I've ever seen his hair. Scott, like you just took a haircut or something, right?
Yeah, it used to be down to here like a week and a half ago.
That's a haircut, folks. But in any case, Scott is a great friend, a great mentor. He was an advisor to FitGrid, still helps to advise FitGrid. But take his last 5 companies, he's taken them from 0 to $25 million in 3 years. So phenomenal. He has over 100,000 people that follow him on LinkedIn as he speaks about sales and what it takes to build amazing sales organizations. And I think the philosophies that he has, will be applicable no matter whether you're a studio owner or whether you're an executive at a large corporation. I've done everything with Scott from, just be on the phone when he gives you like hard ass advice, right? When you really need it, to surf and sales retreats that he has in Costa Rica. And if you're lucky enough to get an invite to that, then please go. I learned some of my best lessons there playing ping pong against Scott. I'm pretty good, but I have technique. I'm like, Scott is ugly and awful, but deadly. He's just like, He has a big wingspan, right? And the lesson he taught me after that was, dude, you're working too hard. You are working really hard, much harder than I am for every point. Took that back in life and in sales. And Scott, you talk about yourself a little. Tell us about you.
That was great.
Yeah, you like that?
I was not expecting to reminisce about the ping pong incident, but thanks for having me here. I appreciate it, man. In addition to some of the things NT was talking about, I've been building and scaling sales organizations and advising sales organizations for the last 20 years or so. I was a VP of sales a half dozen times. And the last 3+ years, I've been running my own sales consulting and RevOps shop. Been running for 6-7 years now a business called Surf and Sales that NT was talking about, sales and leadership conference a couple times a year in down in Costa Rica, and I run a few different sales and revenue communities. I ran this company called Thursday Night Sales for the last few years, and I just launched a new sales and revenue community called GTM United. And the fitness angle for me, I grew up playing every sport you could think of. Played 4 sports in high school at different times, and had a full ride in college. Played tennis and soccer for 4 years. I've always been an athletic person, and try to stay as fit as I can. Also had some difficulties along the way. I ended up losing my soccer career due to illness. Spent 4 years in the hospital. Had to find a way back through all that, and that kind of got me into surfing, and most recently pickleball and ping pong and things like this. So anyway, that's who I am, what I'm about, and hopefully why I can be a little bit helpful to those of you who are paying attention today.
Very cool, man. All right, so I'm going to jump right into it. We have roughly 50 minutes. We're going to go back and forth, everyone, and then the last 15 or so minutes, we'll open it up for Q&A. Any questions that you have, again, pop into the comments, and we'll endeavor to answer them. Although it might actually be a chatbot that answers for us. You never can tell. Okay, so Scott, these days I sit at the intersection of some pretty interesting worlds. FitGrid and BFS both service small membership-based businesses that house communities, so community-based businesses. It could be studios, gyms, spas, clubs. I think probably the lessons that we could take away around how to help these organizations could even extend to places like the Girls and Boys Scouts, right? I love the space because these are literally the places that helped America keep its sanity, during COVID. So I feel like every day I get up and I go to work and end up helping people to stay healthy and fit. But there's that, and then there's the intersection of tech. And the one thing I can say about these businesses is that the owners of those businesses never signed up to be a chief technology officer of anything. And so the conversation is always a very interesting conversation, even as you're sort of saying, hey, let us help you. And I expect that AI will have a similar sort of interesting, path there as well. So I sit at the intersection of that and the intersection of passion and logic. Passion, why passion? Because these studio owners, a lot of them are SMBs. They are former instructors that had an audience, decided to start a business. Refugees from corporate America who decided to go and do that, or people who found their space by doing things like yoga and then said, let's go from there. It's almost like jewelry creators, right? They love the art so much that when you say, you got to cut staff, you got to do this, you got to do that, or wait, how are your profit margins, becomes a very difficult conversation. So it's a very interesting intersection of things, and I suspect that some of your hardcore business lessons around sales will be very welcome because they might not have heard some of this before. So I'm going to jump in with a few sales questions. We're going to divide this conversation into sales and then the fun stuff around AI. So let me start just by giving. Let me start by giving a picture of the type of business that we're talking about. So let's say that you have a boutique studio. Has a small 5-person management team. The owner, the manager, has a few front desk people, 10 instructors, 200 to 300 clients, doing anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million a year. That's a broad range, but think about that. Generally, profit margins, at least pre-COVID, were around 20%. So that's the idea, for the type of business owner that we're talking to. And then you have enterprise groups, which could be franchises. but those franchises are made up of a lot of those smaller groups I just described. So that's the audience that we're talking to, or we're talking to people on the LinkedIn audience that are talking to those folks. So just so you have that in mind. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. A lot of folks in this small business space think of sales as a dirty word, right? How should they be thinking about sales?
They should be thinking it as a way to solve people's problems and help people. It's about serving somebody. It's not about this 1980s Wall Street view, or Wolf of Wall Street type stuff. It's about how can I best serve my clientele and help them solve whatever problems and challenges that they're going through. So if you have clients who have fitness goals and challenges, it's how can I best help them achieve these things? And you have to put yourself out there and say, hey, NT, I run this class, I run these, events over here. I think it might benefit you to join. And you have their best interests at heart. And if I'm selling to boutique studio like the one you're talking about, you have to evolve away from this idea of like, I'm just trying to close you. I'm just trying to close every deal that I possibly can. It's like you said it real well, man. Like these are business owners that kept us all sane for 3 years, or these are the small business owners that are at like the heart and backbeat, of America, right? That everything is kind of based on. So I feel good about that mission. I want to help them evolve and do better. I want to take them maybe from, 20% margins to 25% margins or more. How can I help them solve some problems that maybe they haven't thought about or had to deal with yet, that I'm aware of just coming from the space that I'm in? And I want to present that information to them. So, you just got to kind of realize that selling in 2023 is very different than it was way back in the day.
It's not Wolf of Wall Street anymore.
No, not Wolf of Wall Street, and it's not, door-to-door vacuum sales in 1950 or something like that, right?
Right.
It's a very, very different process now.
So there are two sides to this. There is the, selling and or encouraging studio owners to understand what it is, but the studio owners also sell to consumers. Now, you mentioned something really powerful, which was understand the problem, that they're facing and try to solve that. So in both of those scenarios, because one is a B2B, proposition, you're speaking to the studio owner. The studio owner is speaking to the client or the consumer, potential consumer. How do you discover in each one of them what their problem is in each of those cases? So if you're talking to the studio owner, or if the studio owner is trying to talk to a set of clients or their existing clients.
Well, if you are a studio owner, you probably know what the problems are that we all have.
We all meaning the consumer base.
Meaning the consumer base.
Yeah.
Like, I struggle to be consistent with my fitness goals. Mm-hmm. I struggle over shame of like getting started potentially. I struggle with not being patient enough and therefore quitting too soon. Or I go too hard in the paint too fast and I injure myself all the time.
Right.
I don't have time. I can't find a way to sneak in these workouts, right? And if you don't know that stuff, you talk to the people who are in your studio, who are going to your classes, going to your gym. That's the best way to figure out like what's going on with the pulse of the consumer base out there, is to talk to the people that you interact with.
How do I do that? Like Survey Monkey, or just stop them in the hallway with a pen and a pad? Like, what are you thinking?
I mean, all of the above.
Yeah.
Frankly, I think getting people while they're there is great, kind of friendly customer service. I think keeping people engaged when they're not in the studio through surveys, like you said, or something like that is a great way to do it. You can just pick up the phone and make calls proactively and say, hey, NT, looks like you've been coming to the studio for like 4 years. Can I borrow you for 5 minutes? I have like 3 questions I want to ask you. Great. What's the biggest challenge of you, getting to the gym every day? What's the biggest problem, that prevents you from like going to more classes than just the ones you go to? You can do all of those kind of things to just learn what's going on. And once you know what the problem is that these people are experiencing, then you can start to develop solutions around them. Now, if I'm selling to the studio, same thing. I ask.
Yeah.
I have to dig in. I'm not just showing up and saying, hey, NT, this is Scott from scottleese.com. And I have this amazing point of sale solution and blah, 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 blah. Nobody cares. Nobody has time for all that stuff. I have to call you up and say, hey, NT, looks like you've been in business in New York City there for a few years now. You survived COVID. Nicely done, right?
Yeah. Platinum goes a long way.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And so you just kind of build up and you're like, I was on your website. I noticed that you don't have an AI chatbot, since we're talking about AI, right? Mm-hmm. So do you think it's possible that, sometimes people show up on your website and you might have been able to capture them there and bring in that lead? Is there a reason why you haven't looked into that? And you just start the dialogue, right? And you find out, well, they don't know anything about tech, or they're understaffed.
Yeah.
Or whatever the pains are that they're going through based on what your solution is, what your product is. You learn these things by asking.
Now, I learned this. I sort of knew it before, but you really drummed it into me when we were going through the process with FitGrid. That what you did there is discovery, what we call discovery, right? Now, the interesting thing that I found in the conversations that we had was I would be like, all right, I would ask a few questions, and then I'd be like, okay, enough with the questions. Let me go into, what I have for them. And you really taught me to just sort of sit in my discomfort and like stay on that discovery piece a lot longer than I thought. If there was like a half-hour call, you were talking like 15, 20 minutes of that should be discovery. That's on the studio owner side. Would you recommend that same thing on the consumer side? And how do you think about the discovery process? Like, what's the right amount of discovery to do with folks?
Well, some of it depends on the complexity of what the solution is. So if you're selling a really complex piece of technology to studio owners, that discovery process might take 20, 30 minutes. If it's a super simple thing, you're trying to sell somebody water service or something like that. Like, that's not super complicated. So the discovery is probably much shorter.
Right.
When you're talking to a consumer, I think the discovery process has to be a lot longer than we actually think. I think that people take a long time to actually take action. It's very easy to just like have a quick couple question conversation with somebody and get NT to say to me, yeah, that sounds great. Like, I'm for sure gonna show up and like do this. And then we hang up the phone and like, yeah, that guy's coming to the class for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But they don't actually take action.
Right.
Because the discovery process is a little more nuanced. It's not just telling somebody what their problem is. It's actually asking questions and getting them to admit to you what their problem is. Very big difference between me telling you something's busted and me asking a few questions and you sort of saying, Scott, this thing is busted over here. But that's not enough. What people want to do, and what I used to tell you, was that part is not enough. I can't just jump right into like what my solution is and what we do and what we offer you. It's okay. Now that you have that problem, do you understand why it's important to solve that problem? Do you see the value in fixing this? And even that's not important enough, because we all know that we have problems. We all know we should fix certain things, but there's a little thing missing called urgency.
Right.
And that's the part that is skipped more often than not. Mm-hmm. So it's, do they understand and admit that they have this problem?
Yep.
Do they believe there's value in fixing it? And do they believe it's priority number one to do something about it right now instead of kicking the can down the road till next year?
Yep.
And once we get those things where we're all kind of on the same page, now people are really open to hearing about what's your product, what's your service, what's your solution, what's your offer. and they convert at a much higher rate.
You know, it's interesting. One of the reasons, guys, who are out there, one of the reasons why, you know, I keep going back and forth between this conversation with the studio owner, the small business owner, and the conversation with the consumer is because in many cases I find that they're the same people, right? Like the questions that you ask, like the small business owner actually acts a lot like a consumer, you know, in the way that they think and they process, especially if they sit on the passion side, you know, of the equation. They're not sitting there thinking about my profitability margins need to be like 30, 40%, like 5 years from now or whatever. They're really responding to a lot of the same stuff that Scott is talking about. But Scott, when we go and we do all of this discovery, what you also told me was that there needs to be process. Like, so we're gathering all of this information. What do you do with it? Like, how do you and how do you continue the conversation if you need to? I mean, do we just write things down on a scratch pad, Google Sheets? Like, how do we think about like the process of this and how consistent we need to be in doing that?
Well, you know, this is where doing the same things in the same order in the same step yields you the best result. So you don't want to try one thing on Monday and try a new thing Tuesday and just zigzag all over the place. You'll never really find out what's working or not. So you come up with a strategy. Maybe it's, I'm going to, you know, make a bunch of cold calls today. Maybe it's, I'm going to send email. Maybe it's, I'm going to do direct mailers or whatever it is. And you do these things the same way over and over and over, right? And then you look at the results and you start to figure out, okay, I actually tried this channel, got these results. You know, I made 100 calls. I talked to 50 people. 25 people took a demo, 12 people I sent a contract to, 5 people said yes, right? I got a 40% conversion rate. I'm feeling pretty good.
And you're recommending this whether we're doing this talking to business owners or consumers. Conversion rate is just, you made 10 calls, you got 3 people to come into the studio. Same thing.
You're just trying to understand your process and your metrics. And once you know kind of what the math is around that, okay, then you know what you should do in order to get the type of result that you want. And if there's slippage somewhere, if you're noticing, well, I sent out 20 contracts, but none of them came back in, that tells you information and it shows you where in your process you're doing something a little bit wrong. So that's where the coaching would need to be kind of applied in, right? So that consistency is huge. And, you know, you asked like, how do you do it? Listen, when I started selling 20 something years ago, I had a pen and paper and I was making little tick marks on a piece of paper, right?
That's technology effort. Pen and paper.
Best technology, not the most efficient use of somebody's time. But if you are, you know, super cash strapped, right? Or maybe really not tech savvy or something like that, you can go back to this older methodology and still get the data and therefore the results that you're looking for. But if you recognize like there are certain moments where we have stepped up and evolved our process, like, you know, 25, 30 years ago, people barely had a computer. Then they had a desktop.
Yeah.
Then everybody had a laptop. Now everybody has a computer in the palm of their hand, basically, right?
Seem to be in your brain.
So we have evolved, right? So we've evolved in doing things and doing business differently. So at some point, you know, somebody who's utilizing technology is going to move faster and more efficiently than that person using pen and paper. And you're in danger of getting leapfrogged by those folks, right? And as, you know, we start to talk about AI and stuff like that later on, this is one of those moments where there's going to be people who are laggards and who are like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. I don't know. And there'll be people who are early adopters who figure out that this thing is not going away. How do I find opportunity with it, right? Those people will jump out in front the same way people did with, you know, sales enablement technology and sequences, the same way people did with CRM technology, the same way people did with, you know, power dialers and things like this, right? So you can live in fear of it, and be irritated and annoyed that this exists, or
get on board,
see it as opportunity.
Giddy up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna keep harping on one thing because it's something that I think is, again, important to the folks who are out there to hear this. Regardless of who you are and what you're doing in the sales process, what you have described is a process, and it's a playbook. I will never forget that when you came in, you listened to the problems, that we had and the challenges we were having, sort of in the market and all the rest of that. And they said, okay. And like 90% of the problems you are solved with a consistent playbook, for going at these things. And you had a playbook. How important is it for even the studio owner that's going out and selling to consumers, or anyone that's trying to attract or get the attention of studio owners, to have a consistent playbook? And what are some of the key elements of your playbook, without giving away all your corporate secrets?
I mean, I think it's extremely important, unless you want to be doing every single role from now in perpetuity till the end of time. Because what the playbook does is it takes what NT knows cold, right? This is your business, your baby, your passion. Nobody can sell it like you can, right? But how do you scale NT? Mm-hmm. The only way to scale NT is to get everything that's locked in his brain out onto, paper, so to speak. So when you pull other people, so when you pull other people into the organization, you recruit me in. You're not just like, hey, Scott, go figure it out.
Right.
You're like, hey, this is what we do. Like, here's who we sell to. Here's what the people we sell to care about. And there's 5 different types. Here's how we approach cold calling. Here's how we approach email. Here's how we think about customer service. Here's all the different competitors that you might run into, right? And you're arming people with information and a process and a methodology, right, to go be successful. So you're hiring people in with a better chance of success versus hiring people in with a high probability of failure.
Yep.
You're expecting them to do everything on their own.
Yep.
So you create these safety nets, if you will. Like, let's say you have 10 people in your organization. Well, what happens if only one person knows how to do X thing? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what happens if that person leaves? Mm-hmm. And they've documented nothing, and you've documented nothing?
You're done.
All of that information leaves with them. That's a big problem. And a lot of small businesses don't think about this. It's a little bit boring. Sure. It's not sexy to document everything. I get it. But it's super, super important as it pertains to helping you scale.
Yep.
Right?
Now I have 2 more questions on the sales side, but when we talked about playbooks, because I think this is important, because I think too many people out there don't think about or don't use playbooks. But how do you develop a playbook? And I think that what you told me, and I'll let you finish this, but you're like, you already know it, or at least the best people in your organization already know it, or as the founder, you already know it. What you're doing is taking NT and putting it down on paper. How do you develop a playbook for your organization?
Well, I think you just figure out what are the things that people are doing in each function that I would need to teach somebody else. So if it's sales, for example, it's who's our ideal customer profile, which makes sure that we're going after the right people, right? If I'm trying to sell swimming lessons, that's a different target market than somebody who's doing all their exercise on land and doesn't know how to swim, right? It would be a waste of time to sell swim lessons to a certain type of people, right? So that's selling to the right people. It's what's the messaging, what's the way we handle certain objections. It's how do we, what's our pricing packages, all this kind of stuff. If it's marketing, it's, how do we think about demand generation? It's how do we think about content creation? How do we write blog posts? How do we run our podcast? What does our website design look like? If it's customer success, how do we know that our customers are happy? What are the metrics that we're tracking there? Retention, customer satisfaction surveys, all this kind of stuff.
Yep. Yep.
And so you just kind of list it out one by one, just a brainstorm, right? And you think, okay, if I was going to hire somebody into this role, here's the things that I think are some of those duties.
Yep.
And then you don't have to get super fancy with it. You can literally just open up a Word document and type up a sales pitch,
Yep.
type up, an email sequence, whatnot. And over time, you refine these things, right? You get smarter, you figure out like, well, this 5-paragraph, email
Yep.
actually should be trimmed down to like 2 sentences that are just as effective.
Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
so the big, huge playbook starts to get more efficient and effective. And then as your business grows, you start to have other things. Like now you're no longer selling just to dentists. Suddenly you're also selling to orthodontists.
Right.
And there's a playbook there. And now you're not selling into sort of family-owned practices. Now you're selling into a group, and there's like an orthodontics or dental group. And now you go above there, and now you're selling to a whole, regional kind of conglomerate of these things. So now you have more of like a small business playbook, and that's a little bit different than one that is more enterprise, bigger, right?
Yeah.
So people overthink it a little bit. It's just list the steps out, draft these things up, collaborate with people who are there. Like, is this how we all believe that this should be done? And then bang, you've got version 1 of a playbook. And then just remember that that playbook is a living, breathing entity that you go back to and evolve over time.
It was interesting. I was listening to someone the other day, and this idea of playbooks also came up. And they made a point that I thought was a fascinating point. They said, would you believe that most sports teams in the world are run better than most businesses? And they were like, it doesn't matter whether it's the professional level or if it's down at the high school and grade school level, because they have a playbook and because they practice this stuff over and over and over again. They wouldn't dream of putting their team on the field without having a playbook and without having people in positions and practicing, all the time. And this is something we don't do as much as we should.
I've said this before. Think about, for everybody listening, if you played a musical instrument or you played sports and athletics, think all the way back to like when you were a kid, if you did it when you were young. Think about how many hours you practiced getting good at the guitar. Think about how many hours you spent on a tennis court working on hitting forehands. Now, it's funny that we were so willing to put in that much time when we were kids to get good at something, and how little we practice at our main competency as a business owner or as a business professional. This is the way that we eat. This is the way that we feed our family or try to secure our future or afford to, go nice places and get nice things and have the comfort of a home and stuff like that. And yet we were willing to spend more time as a child working on a game than our own craft right now. It doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense. And there's a comment in here by Isla. And how do you make time to document? I mean, based on what we just talked about, it's how do you not make time, for it? I mean, I think it's something that if you take what Scott just said, this is how you eat, right? And how you become more successful, ultimately how you reduce, the amount of time that you have to spend months from now or years from now doing something. You take the time now. I mean, Scott, do you want to respond to that?
Well, you have to prioritize it. And I think I understand the heart of the question is like, if I pick this thing up, I have to put something else down because I have limited bandwidth in my day or whatever, right? But I don't know the rest of the context, but let's assume that we needed to, sell some business today. Okay. So there's 2 different approaches. The first approach would be, let's just start dialing and knocking on doors and whatever freaking happens. And we're just going to hustle and see and hopefully we close some deals. Okay. You can do that for a period of time. The alternative approach would be, okay, NT, we need to close some deals. Let's sit and figure all this stuff out. So when we go talk to people, we know exactly what we're doing. What happens is the people who sit and strategize a little bit and do some of this dirty work are that much more effective at what they do. Mm-hmm. So these people who ran around because they were so scared about, going through half a day without a deal, they exhaust themselves. Maybe they trip and fall over a couple of deals, but we built a process with, by less effort, being more efficient, we end up actually getting more deals in.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to put a little bit of like near-term gratification to the side and look to things with a longer tail view. I'm doing these things today because in the end, it will help me succeed more.
Yep. Very interesting. Now I'm going to ask the last sales question. We're going to go to the AI. I see some stuff being written in the comments. We'll come back to that later. But okay, I'm a studio owner. And I'm coming to the big bat, Scott Leese, and I'm like, Scott, I heard all about you. You got 100,000 followers on LinkedIn. I heard you talking about sales the other day. How do I double sales in my studio over the course of the next year? Tell me, Scott. How do I do that?
Well, easy question. No problem. You got to leverage what you've got, right?
Yeah.
And if I imagine a world where you are time constrained, financially constrained, right? You don't have millions of dollars floating around. You take advantage of what you've got. So you find a way to be visible. That means a lot of different things. Be out in the community, be active on LinkedIn, attend webinars, participate in networking groups, be part of online communities. Credibility helps. So, whether that's testimonials or case studies, things like that, or referrals, that helps. Having this process that we talked about, that's a non-negotiable for me if you want to double where you're at right now. Stop just winging things and have a specific process. Zoom out a little bit and be patient. Try to the best of your ability not to worry about, oh my God, I didn't quadruple sales this afternoon. Scott doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, it takes time, right? So visibility, credibility, process, patience, and then finding a way to articulate your differentiator, like what you do that makes you special or what you do that is different. And it's kind of like the difference between where people are and where they want to be, right? And so, hey, NT, here's where you're at right now. And I ask questions and I've learned, okay, here's where you want to be. Here's how I think we can help you get there, right? And it's that servant kind of mentality rather than the sales mentality from the 50s and the 80s and stuff like that. So hopefully
that's great.
Makes some sense.
That's great. Okay. AI. Artificial intelligence, let's get the big questions out of the way. Do you believe in Terminator? Are we heading towards a future that's like Terminator-like?
This is kind of a fun conversation and also like a little bit scary, I tend to lean more on the side of like, we need to be a little bit careful or we're going to end up like Skynet and all these like sci-fi movies. Right. But then people say to me, well, how are we going to be careful? And I have no idea. Right. I don't know how to build AI. I don't know. I'm certainly not qualified to like put rules and stipulations in place. Here's what I do know. The technology is not going to slow down.
Yep.
So if we're uncomfortable with AI, so freaking what? The world is moving that direction and we're going to get left behind and trampled. So we have to see opportunity, like I was saying before, and figure out how can we apply this to better our world, better our personal situation, better our business, better serve our clients.
Yep.
Right. And I hope that if we do that, it is more of a net positive than some sort of negative.
Utopian, or dystopian future, whatever.
Well, there's a lot of, I would love to have an artificial intelligent robot that does my dishes and my laundry every single day.
That would be great, right?
Meet George Jetson, right?
George
I have
Jetson.
no problem with that.
Right.
it starts to get spooky if you think like, well, what happens if these things become sentient and don't want to do the dishes anymore?
Right.
Try to kick me out of my own house. Like,
you do the dishes. You do the dishes.
It starts to get sci-fi-ish,
right?
But there's certain things I think that can make our world a little bit better.
So to that point, where are you seeing some of the things that not bring it down to back to earth, so to speak? I personally believe that artificial intelligence, exactly what you said, has tremendous potential for bad and tremendous potential for good as well. To that extent, it's sort of like nuclear power, right? And we see this being applied towards a whole bunch of industries. The sales industry, you've got companies like Lavender that are helping you to figure out, how you can write better messages, sales prospecting messages. What are you seeing in your industry or in sales where AI is coming into play, and how can it be helpful?
Well, certainly, content creation, and email scripts and stuff like that. That's one that a lot of people are kind of aware of. But the research piece, I mean, I had a conversation the other day. I ran an offshoot of my surf and sales event called Golf and Sales last week.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about the power of AI. And there's this one guy in attendance who sells to publicly traded companies. And I was saying like, hey, how are you like utilizing AI to sell to them? And he said he puts in a prompt into ChatGPT that says like, summarize, the last 4 earnings calls and whatnot, and give me some talking points. And we were all like, holy shit.
Amazing.
They just did tons of sales research for you in like 2.5 seconds.
Yep.
Right? You asked me this question about, what are the things that goes into a playbook? I bet if we went to, a certain tool, we could type in, hey, I own a small studio. What are some of the processes that I should put in place in order to grow revenue? The AI will generate ideas. I don't know that all the ideas are perfect and winners right now, but it's going to generate a bunch of stuff. I talked a little bit before about having like a chat interface on your website. Mm-hmm. Well, we can type up scripts so somebody feels like they're interacting with a human, but it's not human kind of run. It's operating in the background, right?
Yep.
Things like this are beneficial for those people trying to conduct business right now, right? Those are positives to me. And some of the things are being done right now.
Yeah. I always say like there are many areas that AI can impact, but certainly summarizations, like you mentioned, the content creation, absolutely. I mean, I just see broad applicability. How much do you think that it is a threat to jobs versus ultimately being a complement to jobs? Like it saves money and time. Let's talk specifically in the sales space, right? It helps you, as you say, on the research, understanding who you're talking to, but you still ultimately need the human being to go and have that touch. Or, you know what, we just got rid of a person and, we're paying like X amount per month.
I mean, you could look at it like that, but you could also choose to look at it like the jobs that may get eliminated. Mm-hmm. All those people are now freed up to get creative and figure out other types of jobs. Mm-hmm. I don't think jobs are just going to disappear. Mm-hmm. Certain types of jobs might go away. I just think they'll get replaced by other jobs.
Yeah.
A different type. And hopefully more creative roles.
Yeah.
More things that we can be passionate about rather than we're just doing strictly to like pay the bills. If we can do away with mundane tasks all over the place, hopefully that means, okay, there's opportunities to educate people in the consumer base and allow them to pursue other things. And I just don't think I don't think we're going to end up in a world where there's like only 100 jobs available for every 1 million people. I just don't think of it like that. I think all these people us included, are going to start seeing opportunity and thinking, what can we build? What can we do? right? And the
So you have,
menial tasks maybe go away. Maybe there needs to be more people in engineering. Maybe there needs to be more people in science. Like we can apply some of these skills maybe to actually solve some of the world's bigger problems rather than just selling them the newest, latest, greatest marketing technology.
oh, Scott, you are an optimist. You
Who
are. Who knew, right? I mean, what you're basically saying is that you believe more in people's desire to ultimately work and be useful and productive, as opposed to being lazy and just having everything do everything for them, and then living a life in, virtual reality where they have their 8-pack,
Yeah.
and they look exactly how they want to look. I mean,
Yeah. I hope that's my hope at least.
that's the hope, right?
Yeah.
Fair enough. What if you were going to advise sales leaders these days about the best ways in which they could leverage, AI, to make their jobs better, more efficient? I know you've always been focused on like the efficiency factor in the sales process and everything. What are some of the places that you would tell them to think about?
Well, first of
And
all,
by the way, this is sales, whether
yeah,
you're a studio
sure.
owner selling out or whether you're selling to studio owners, regardless. Like,
First of all, I think you need to pay attention to new technologies as they hit the marketplace and be open to them rather than dismissive.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I would listen to my actual sellers, because the salespeople who are on the ground, if I'm here as a leader and I have a team underneath me, those sellers, boots on the ground, they often are more aware than I am about what's out there, because they are always trying to find, little hacks to like make them better, make them more efficient and whatnot. So I would listen to them, say, hey, what are you guys hearing? What are you seeing out there? What tools should I go check out?
Yep.
Right. And I get really good as well at articulating what my problem is, what we stand to gain by implementing this stuff.
Yeah.
And here's our outcome, and articulating that to your founder or your CFO has never been more important.
Right.
In this climate right now, like no sales leader has a company credit card that they get to go buy whatever they want. Everything is running through a CFO or a CEO. So I had this conversation yesterday with somebody who is, trying to get a RevOps resource.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you have to explain the things that are like blockers right now, like what's stuck because you don't have this, and how much is that worth, and what will this do to unstick those things, and what lift would we get in our performance, therefore what would our net positive ROI be? And unless you can articulate that clearly in a straight line, you're going to lose the argument.
Yep. And if you're an individual contributor, you're the salesperson on the ground. I mean, the research is an obvious one. You're going out prospecting. You can go to, as you said, like a certain interface or whatever, and say summarize such and such for me. But how should we think about using AI if you're an individual sales contributor?
It could be as simple as coaching tools. I don't know about you, but 20 something years ago when I was selling, there was no recordings of my call.
Mm-hmm.
And there was certainly no artificial intelligence tool that I could say, hey, take me to every point in the call where somebody said something about price.
Mm-hmm.
And I just punch in and out of those parts of the call. Or take me to NT's call where somebody mentioned this particular objection and pop in, right? Doing those things as a seller, listening to your own calls, listening to teammates and colleagues' calls, or sending those calls to mentors or managers and saying, hey, at minute 23 of this call, I ran into somebody telling me, I think I'm going to stay put. Call me back in January. Give me some feedback on that. That didn't exist back in the day.
Yep.
It barely existed 8 years ago, the last time I started a new job as a VP of sales. It was just getting started.
Right.
And you started utilizing that technology, and I was like, oh my God, this is so much easier than me having to sit there and listen to everybody on my team's 45-minute phone call once a day and staying up until 2 a.m. trying to get shit done. Right? So simple, easy things like that. Research, write better emails, coach yourself, have other people coach you. These are real easy ways to implement it.
Now I have a surprise for you, because we continue to evolve as a company. And I'll show this to you, get your reaction right before we open it up for questions in the last 10 minutes or so. But one of my companies, FitGrid, is diving deep, into the AI space, and we're very excited about what we've got. And we actually speak about it as, for studio owners, as a sales assistant, sort of thing, because there's so much that it does in that way. So I'm going to show this to you and show this to our audience and get your reaction on the other side.
You're going to watch my facial expressions in real time.
Hold on one sec. Let's see if I can get this going. There it is. All right, let's see. You hear that?
I don't hear anything. Oh, here we go. Here we go. That looks like Ex Machina. You've been busy, man. You've been in the lab.
We've been in the bat cave, man.
You've been in the lab. Wow.
But
I was not expecting that.
So tell me. So here was our thing with the whole AI thing. We were like, look, it's really good at taking data and information and creating content and placing that so that you can change the tone of your message or all sorts of other things that we have, the goals of your message or whatever. And you can just regenerate messages, really, really quickly, which can help you with deep personalization, which we think is really, really great. If you apply that to your perspective on the sales perspective, I mean, where are we going? It's a whole new world.
It is a whole new world. I mean, the amount of, here's what happens. I don't have to spend so much time thinking about what I'm going to write. I just have to get better at the prompt. So that prompt of what do I want the AI to do, like write a whimsical prospecting note to NT, who owns Etuk Studios, referencing his home in Nigeria, right?
Yep.
Not that I would necessarily do that, but that's some example of a creative prompt that I tell the tool to do. And now it spits out this different type of message. So our creativity is just evolving. It's going from, okay, I have to write a whole entire message and think through, or I have to write this whole blog post, 3,000 words or whatever. Man. Well, instead, I just have to think, okay, how do I capture the mood, the pain, the attention, convert the value, convey urgency in a prompt. Bang, the work is done. So you can move very intelligently in a very targeted way and very fast.
So it's a whole new world. It's a whole new world. All right, we have 5 minutes left, and I wanted to open it up to questions. Anyone out there have questions for us? Scott, I'm going to read some of these comments over here and come back. I don't have my glasses, of course, so if I do the one-eyed demon, what's going on over here? I've used AI to write a profile in a multi-chain studio during a closing call. Way more info than I can get from a Google search and way faster. Great point, Justin. Thank you for that.
It's true. You can write a script and a prompt now, NT, and plug it into an AI tool, and a artificial intelligence humanoid will show up, read that prompt. And now you have like an onboarding video that you just created. So let's say I just purchased a membership to your studio and you want to have like a cool experience. That could automatically trigger this video being read by an AI, not by you, with words that you generated from your tool of saying, hey, create a funny onboarding message that an AI will read to my new member. Bang. Interesting experience.
You want to be part of our product advisory committee? Let's see. What is Arena saying? Hey, Arena. AI definitely helps with efficiency, but what about consumers' trust? Soon a lot of consumers figure out that they're talking to a different version of ChatGPT across the channels. Do you think it'll impact the consumer's behavior?
Only if they don't like the outcome. Like, I don't know, what issue you're trying to deal with or whatever, but if you deal with a human and you have a good experience, you're satisfied. If you deal with a bot, right now, I think we think about that as that bot will be a less optimal experience than dealing with a human. Right. But if we get to a place where the experience is the same, what do I care? Right. I really don't care.
Right.
I don't care if a human does my grocery shopping on Instacart or a robot does my Instacart grocery shopping.
As long as they're getting it right.
As long as they get it right. Right. So, but I think it's difficult to conceptualize because right now we think AI, robot, less optimal experience than dealing with human.
Right.
But how long until it's not?
Yeah.
Less optimal.
Well, and that comes back to the first set of questions. Like, when does it get so scary?
When does it get too spooky?
When does it get too spooky?
Yeah. Right? I agree with the person who asked the question though. Like, the trust factor is a big issue right now. And there could be a world where everybody's initial reaction to this message brought to you by AI is very negative. This guy can't do anything himself. It's all computer generated. It's not real. Yeah. That could happen.
Yeah.
It could.
I have one last question, then we let these fine folks go. It's sort of along the lines of what we've been talking about before we sort of summarize it all. I remember when I was growing up, I had to learn the multiplication tables backwards, forwards, inside out, and addition and do it in my mind and all the rest of that. I am amazed by, if you ask kids these days, and you ask them what 150 times 3 is, how many have to pull out a calculator to get that done? And so, there's this constant thing where I'm just like, but they can figure out their way online into a video game and all sorts of stuff that I can't do a lot faster. And I keep trying to figure out, are they just evolving a different set of skills, yes, like a higher function level, or are we just getting dumber?
No, I don't. There's some things that we maybe are getting dumber at, but we're getting so much smarter and more intelligent at all these other things. I think, your sentence is like a sign that you're getting old.
Yeah, man.
Your parents probably,
you're not supposed to say that.
I mean, my parents probably said the same thing about me with certain things that I did or do. Yeah. The same. I have 2 teenage boys. Yep. I sure as heck have had that exact thought and almost asked them that question.
Yep.
Right. But they are far superior than me at other stuff. And to think where they'll be when, they're my age, I can hardly even conceptualize it, And when they're my age, they'll be saying the same thing about their own kids, probably.
Yep.
These kids are so lazy and whatever now. But no, they just are evolving a different set of skills that matters for their era.
So bring it back to the sales side, guys. You want to have some graybeards in the room who will teach folks how to actually do stuff, and then some young sales kids that actually know how to get it done in the medium that we're using today. Scott, any final words for folks? If you were going to just give some final sales thoughts for everyone out there, how can they kick ass in 2023? What should they be doing?
I think just really make sure that you understand the problems that your prospects and customers have. Make sure that they understand why it's important to fix them and why it's important to do right now. And then you can talk to them about how you do it. I think that is a timeless part of the selling process. It's about serving, and it's not about selling.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Leese, friend, mentor, and incredible ping pong player. But I will
no wasted movement.
Next time we see it, right?
No wasted movement.
No wasted movements. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.